Our next speaker is Laura McFarland, an architect at Liberty IT. Laura's talk is all about using well-architected frameworks to build right-sized products. Please put your hands together for Laura.
Morning all. How is everybody? I'm just going to talk to this screen here because that's all I'm used to doing for 2 years. I actually haven't been out in the office yet, so feels strange. Okay, so right-sized products, well-architected frameworks. The guys have already talked about well-architected frameworks. A little bit more depth, but I've only got 20 minutes. So I am an architect at Liberty IT. I started my career in Kainos. I did 7 years there. Seems like totally a lifetime ago. And I've now done 22 years in LIT. And yes, if you do quick maths, I am that old. I'm quite an active person. I've a couple of shots there. I am massive into cycling these days. I used to do World Championship sailing, but the back just can't take it anymore. So when I shove myself up and down a few mountains. My career highlights, I did want to call this out. I was at reInvent in 2018 in Las Vegas. And if you think this is a big deal, jeez. Oh, reInvent was scary. And I had to do it twice, so I'm not repeating this one, so that's okay. And it was showcasing virtual assistant for Liberty Mutual's call centers, and it was a really big deal at the time. We were the first to put in chatbots, voice chatbots into our call centers for enterprise-wide, and it was amazing. And still is, still going, bigger and better. So what is Liberty IT? So we are in Belfast, we are in Dublin, and a lot in America. But we have a single customer, it is Liberty Mutual Insurance. And yes, we write insurance products, but we use cutting-edge technology. So we're the cogs, and I think we are very innovative in Belfast. Hoping everybody's on Agile now. Are there any waterfallers here? Yes, right. You know what I'm talking about now then? So hopefully you're all used to it. We do your short sprints, and I'm sure there's some Kanbaners as well. But we're used to doing this sprint 1, sprint 2, however many sprints you have. You maybe push to production in between times, but quite often do a couple of sprints and chuck it out to production. You then back into focusing on your backlog, which is never ending, right? That backlog just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you're back into just sprinting. And I know sometimes it feels like a full-on sprint all the time. And I know that can be tough. We're generally pretty good. We do have good observation, putting in, making sure we've got the right alarms going in production. And that's when we have to focus on, yikes, something went wrong. How do we fix it? Get it fixed. Back into focusing on your backlog. So hopefully you build to the correct requirements. You've got your good tests. You know you get everything signed off. But the big deal now is how do you know you've right-sized that for production? With going serverless, with being with AWS, with managed services, we have so much power now, but are you using it right? So how do we know? How do we measure? What's your best practices? Do you write them? Who writes them? And what's your benchmark? How do you use that? So this is where the guys talked about well-architected frameworks from the cloud providers. It's their best practices, it's not ours, they've written it for their environment. And you can use the cloud providers' best practices to try and right-size yourself for production. So I went further than the 3. So Gartner pushed out their top 6 cloud providers. So I know you'll probably be aware of the big names there. Alibaba Cloud you might not be aware of. If anybody's creating any software for China, that's your only place to put it up, because China, yeah, well, we all know about China. So they all do have well-architected frameworks. And if you want some bedtime reading, yeah, you're there. There's enormous amount of work behind all of these cloud providers' best practices. So, all based on what we've talked about before, the pillars of well architecture. And I do have these in the same order for a reason. So there were 5, and as Mark talked about before, sustainability came along the pillar with AWS at reInvent last year. So just to do a quick comparison. Again, I didn't read every word of the best practices. Oh gosh, it takes too long. I have ranked these as Gartner has ranked the cloud providers. So they do have AWS at the top. They have Azure really close behind, followed by Google. Alibaba, Oracle, IBM, they kind of fall below because they really are just there to provide virtual machines. They don't have the same kind of services that AWS, Azure, or Google are pushing out. So I kind of agree with it. So all the pillars are there except Alibaba. They don't give a darn about cost or operational excellence. They just don't care. So with sustainability, it's only just there with AWS. So because they've just pushed it out, I think the other guys do have a lot to catch up on. I will say Microsoft generally do tail into what others are doing. They might not be the forerunners all the time, but I think they will catch up soon. So the next one, I looked at what all the cloud providers give was, do they have an assessment tool? Only AWS. AWS have had it out a good couple of years. Azure actually only pushed theirs from beta to general availability only last September. So I think they are playing catch up. So I'm afraid, Google, you're right. You cannot follow a best practice. There's just reams and reams and reams of documentation, hyperlinks to hyperlinks to hyperlinks of their best practices without an assessment tool. You cannot gauge if you're using their best practices. So I'm sorry. Hey Google, get yourself a tool. Hope I didn't set anybody's phones off. Sorry. It's like I say, you need to evaluate. So against the best practices, evaluate, identify your issues, and more importantly, what's your improvements? To lower the barrier to be able to do that, to adopt a well-architected framework, you've got to be able to have an assessment tool. So say that's why I'm not going near Google just yet. I've pulled out a few comments from how AWS say you should do a review process using their tool. And I know I've highlighted a few things there, and I'm totally behind everything. Consistent manner, so if you have that assessment tool, you can do it consistently. I love the blame-free approach. Darn, I missed a best practice there. Right, I better get to it. So it's not that I forgot to do it, it's like we didn't build it in at the time. It's got a set of outcomes and a set of actions. So again, it's like I've used a tool, it's telling me what to do. Lightweight process, hours, not days. I think when you first start off using the assessment tool, you might go a day. It gets quicker as you go. The more you do it, it gets quicker because you get used to the process. But it's dry, but the outcome's brilliant. I love that it's a conversation and not an audit. An audit, again, is more like the stick to beat you with. The conversation is, how can we get better? And the last one that they recommend, so when you do a well-architected review, you maybe do it on your workload maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. You don't want to keep on going through the same process because it is long. So they recommend that you should do it continually, review your workload, rather than having this formal review. So this is where I go back to the acronym of SCORPS. SCORP, I have to say SCORPS now because there's sustainability. This term first, Mike O'Reilly, I'll give you a high five, virtual high five. Take it back, thank you. So Mike O'Reilly worked with him for a while. He made me the person that I am, Mike. Well, I stepped into his shoes, so kind of. No, seriously. Mike came up with what we refer to as the SCORP review. You wrote it up on the serverless edge. He's co-author of the Flywheel Effect book with Mark and Dave. And so, Mike, see if you need your second book, SCORP review, and I'll co-author it with you. Right? So what is it? So just to go very briefly, so your well-architected review, it sets your baseline. So you're going to do it, say, once, twice a year for a workload. But every 2 to 4 weeks, keep an eye on what you're doing in prod, what you're doing in non-prod, and drive it by your data dashboards. Don't drive it by, I think we're okay. Drive it by your data. We get together and we review all the stats. So it's architects, technologists, all your tech leads, and anybody else can join. Nobody's excluded. If they want to join, if they want to learn, they're welcome. You look at your trends. Am I doing better than I did the last 2 weeks, the last month, the last 6 months? So you keep looking at those trends. And you look to see, have we now got points of action? Do I need to act upon something? Do I need to change something? Is it going too slow? Why is it going too slow? So again, it's like looking, are you well architected? Are you right sized? Look at all your data points. So again, drive it by data, not by speculation. And then with your outcomes, so again, it's all based on your pillars of well architected, and then you'll have priorities coming out of that. So say well architected and right sized. And resized. You can resize down, you don't always have to resize up. So say this is our 6 pillars, so to go over just a few things. So this is not what you do every 2 weeks, because it changes every 2 to 4 weeks, what you do. But I'm just going to pull out some, this is facts, this is what we do. So insecurity, log4j. Anybody here not affected with the gift that kept giving last December? So that became, we started looking at that on our, so again, our 2 to 4 week cadence. It's like, has everybody got that log4j gap plugged yet? We do threat modeling quite often, so you might have new threat model items coming out, so they can get added on to your short review, your quick review. The cost used to be our biggest driver, really, but it definitely flows into the sustainability. If you can lower your cost, you're using less resources, so therefore, this does help. And I know business can be so driven by cost, but like Dave was saying, we're going to have to be driven by sustainability now. I'm glad I didn't do your talk. I can't say sustainability too. So you look at things like cost, and again, because we have so many environments, look at your prod and your non-prod. Your non-prod can be an absolute disaster. Your prod's all shiny, great, and fantastic. Your non-prod might look a disaster. So you do keep an eye on all those environments. Just recently, we've started using Document DB. It's definitely, I know it has more properties, and the search is better than Dynamo. I still love Dynamo. It's my cuddly toy. But Document DB is very useful. It is expensive. And what we found just recently in our SCORP reviews is that Document DB is right-sized for prod. It's way too big for dev and test. We still have to have it high for perf. So that they've been downsized. You've got, reduce the cost, reduce your footprint, all that kind of thing. DynamoDB. So I was really proud of being one of the first people in Liberty to push out the on-demand. And I get really cross at people still grabbing on to these massive amounts of read-write capacity. And I actually just went into dev and tore somebody down because they had 500 read capacity. I was like, tough, you're right. It's costing like maybe £1,000 a month. That's terrible. Anyway, that's my attitude. I didn't ask for forgiveness either. Operational excellence. So again, this is like, are you standing up? Are you reacting? Are you observable? So, these are things that I think we're used to. So looking at your error reports, getting your bills out there when you've got error fixes, mean time to recovery. Reliability pillar has a lot to do with disaster recovery. And the AWS outage, yeah, we're grand, AWS is always up. I think we had 2 outages last year, didn't we? And they were quite painful. So we have to have a focus back again at doing proper disaster recovery. You do look at things like Lambda concurrency. If you don't have a cap on your Lambda, it can spin out of control, and we have had ones that were maybe hitting 50. I'm starting to worry about that concurrency now, so we did take a look at it, and we have been able to reduce it. Call duration, reliability with your test reports, make sure you're chucking up really good stuff into prod. So your performance against, you're looking at your average response times. This is the kind of stuff that I think everybody's used to doing, and looking at your Lambda power tuner. So again, sustainability, I've talked about power tuners, document DB, but we also have curfews in so this is more to the virtual machines. So you spin them down when you're not using them in your lower environments. And again, that's really sustainable. The power's off. So that's not an end list either. There's quite a lot that we do there. So there's a lot to do with right sizing tools. I'm just going to skip through these, but there are a number of items out there to help you. And I'm trying not to be an AWS only. Azure does have optimization tools as well. I know there's quite a few Kainos people here that do a lot more Microsoft.NET. I don't know if you've used the tool yet. I do like it, by the way. But I don't do enough in Azure to really go through the full thing. So yeah, you've got compute optimizers. They look at a number of angles. You can just go straight into any environment and see this. You don't have to, it doesn't take a long time to run. Right sizing your serverless functions. AWS has the power tuner, which is a tool. It's great, immediate feedback. Azure, you just have to follow the best practices, so it takes a little bit more to understand. Same for document DB. You're back into just looking at best practices to right-size your databases and Azure. The compute, again, is just about choosing the right thing for your workload. So again, pick the right thing, monitor it, upscale it, downscale it. So talking about VMs, so you'd think the framework is maybe just serverless only. We actually did an experiment against Spring-Bit in Cloud Foundry against just the AWS, the 5 pillars. 87% of the questions are applicable to non-serverless. It's because I think AWS has written it really well. It's really generic, so don't ignore it if you're not serverless. So a few snips of what we have on our SCORP dashboard. Say it's all data-driven. So this is what we look at every 2 to 4 weeks. So we've got a few, use Power BI, try and use it a little bit more with, so a few DORA metrics there, deployment frequency, change failure. And that change failure, those bars go up to 2. It's brilliant. We use Power BI for our costs. You can see your AWS costs elsewhere, but we draw them into Power BI, and it's really useful. You can then drill down and drill up. Talked about SonarQube to push out what your reliability looks like. Alarms and monitoring. So we kind of have these in quite a few places, in Splunk, in CloudWatch. So we're trying to operationalize this a little bit better and get it more automated so that the teams aren't going through all these individual pieces to try and give our data points for review. So we do have a way to go on this. It's definitely not a perfect review process yet. And it is in pockets in Belfast, Dublin, and it's trying to evangelise it out with our American counterparts to take it on board as well, but we're getting there. So it's just a few touch points of kind of what we've talked about. So measure against your best practices using a tool, SCORP reviews 2 to 4 weeks, and data-driven, blameless, and really big deal is that you're also tech sharing. And I'll do anything to get developers together to have a good chat about tech. So now our picture, agile, Still sprinting, chucking yourself into prod whenever you're ready. You still got your alarms you need to react to, but now you've got this extra, I'm going to take a look at prod, non-prod, see what it looks like, So no longer, you're not just shipping to prod, you know that you're shipping your right size products into prod. And that is the end, so thank you folks.